Mhm.
Gran's brow furrowed. She let out a long sigh. Her voice was quiet and even. A faint electronic sound floated in the air. Luca glanced at the now silent walkie-talkie. He wasn't sure what to think. He wasn't sure. A pit formed in Luca's stomach. Luca's mouth felt dry. Luca could feel his heart beating in his throat. Luca, he wasn't sure. Toby looked up from the clipboard excitedly.
We all know Beacon Pines is a great town. What you may not know is great towns grow from mighty roots. And that is why you cannot tell the story of Beacon Pines without telling the story of one Shopper Valentine. Young Shopper's keen intellect and strong moral fiber led to a grand vision. A vision of a community dedicated to a better tomorrow. In his own words, a better tomorrow is within our grasp, but it requires a singular mind to harness it. Lucky for us, he decided to grow that vision here in Beacon Pines. And how does one grow a better tomorrow? With fertilizer, of course. Valentine's Fertilizer Company became the lifeblood of a town yearning for purpose. But then tragedy struck, a scientific experiment gone wrong. An accident which took Shopper away from us far too soon. To this day, we struggle to pick up the pieces. But one foul harvest isn't enough to stop the people of Beacon Pines. The spirit of Shopper Valentine lives on. It lives in the hearts of everyone with a dream for a better tomorrow. Together, we will follow his example and grow a bountiful future. Paid for by the Valentine family and the Valentine Fertilizer Company Remembrance Fund.
Oh, the Cobb's Ivy, a salad-centric travel guide for Sally Seashores. Luca brushed off a smudge of dust. Or 30 recipes so easy. A peek behind the methods and ruminations of one of the greatest by Patrick. There were rarely any acts, simply a variety of existing content rotated into the front display each week. Kato volunteered at the library during the summers. He wasn't very social, so he'd dedicate each summer to becoming an expert in a single subject, making him a reliable source of very particular knowledge. If you were to ask Kato something he didn't know, he'd escape into the dusty old bookshelves and return with just the right thing. Kato was lost in his reading. Luca crooked his neck to see the title, Introduction to Melitology. He gestured to the shelves. The bottom corner shelf was a dusty array. Only one binding was clean enough to read: Cellular Biology and the Chemistry of Mycological. The entire top level of the, most of which were hankatom. Beck's family moved often, giving her little time to establish any real connections. She would tell you she prefers it that way. Luca shifted his feet uncomfortably. Beck pulled a coin from her pocket. Luca felt a chill as her eyes were locked on the strain. The nearby grass was coated in a fine... Luca watched as Beck dipped a broken tree branch and Beck's eyes widened as flowers grew from the dead wood. First small buds, which quickly bloomed into vibrant petals. As quickly as they had grown, the flowers began to shrivel and turn gray. Beck dropped the stick with a grunt of disgust. Iggy took a step towards Luca, his sneer lit by the glowing puddle. Beck could see tears welling in Luca's eyes, his fists clenched. Some things about Beacon Pines were very different from the city, but a bully from a hayseed town is really no different from a city bully. Beck took a deep breath and thought. Well, time to bust out the tickles. Beck lunged forward and began to tickle under Tish's arms. Tears began to form in Tish's eyes as she gasped for breath between gales of laughter. Beck redoubled her efforts until Tish finally had had enough. Iggy's eyes darted around, a realization dawning on his face that he was now outnumbered. Iggy kicked at the puddle before making his escape. Beck shook the ooze out of her hair as best as she could. Chapter 4: The Best Policy. Luca paused for a moment, catching his breath. He'd only just met Beck, and somehow he already managed to drag her into this mess. Hopefully he could make it up to her. But finding Rollo was his primary concern. Roxy and Fitz looked drained. It was clear they'd spent all day. Roxy's temper could often be dismissed as the impatient, but this was the most intense Luca had ever seen. Her eyes were wild and unfocused, looking straight through Luca. In a torrent of rambled words and tears, Luca broke down. Roxy, still exhausted and angry, softened briefly as her eyes hunted the ground in thought. With a determined sigh, she looked up at Luca. Roxy drew herself up. Roxy tried to think of the safest place to send Luca. Luca wiped his cheeks and gave a quick nod. Looking into the puddle, Roxy rubbed her arms to warm up. After the foul harvest destroyed, the Valentines shuttered off their estate from the rest of town. The Valentine mansion loomed, both figuratively and literally. Well, time to bust out the strange. Beck stared in silence, the only sign of life being the twitch of an eye. At the sight of Iggy taunting Beck, something in Luca snapped. Iggy's smirk shifted to a look of shock as Luca launched himself into his stomach. Iggy's clothes were drenched in the glowing ooze. Iggy's voice began to slur as he struggled to get up. The person at the warehouse, this strange ooze, and what it did to Iggy. Was Rollo caught up in all of this? Beck glanced toward Luca. Rollo was safe. A wave of relief washed over Luca, which was quickly replaced by a sense of dread. Gran is going to kill me. If he hurried, he might just make it home before sundown. Chapter 4. Our harvest awaits. Luca took a deep breath and gingerly opened the door, steeling himself for Gran's wrath. This is a story about struggle. Luca could hear a machine humming somewhere nearby. He felt around wildly, searching for something, and his hands found a hard object. Maybe he yanked it free, lifting the cold. Let me! Luca swung the tile as hard as he could at the shape that still held fast to his leg. He heard the crack of glass as the stone hit the assailant's mask. With a muffled yelp, the hand let go. Luca was free and scrambled to the door. He never looked back once on the long run home. Chapter 3. Everything's fine. The next morning, it was quieter than usual at the breakfast table. Only the sound of silverware and chewing interrupted the awkward silence. Luca checked the soles of his sandals. Valentine, oldest of Sharper Valentine's children, and heir to the Valentine fortune, had a way of making questions seem like demands. Mr. Wilder had learned to assume that if he was hearing from Eris, it was because she had taken issue with something he had put in the paper.
Hả?
Mr. Wilder averted his gaze and began to polish his monocle. Dreams of becoming a big time at night, she searched for the story that could be her big by day. She hawked papers at the newsstand. She leaned forward and pinched Luca's cheek. Luca shifted the basket uncomfortably. Mrs. Fratelli lifted the cloth and inspected the jam. She carefully lifted out her jars of jam. Huddled at his counter, Hiram Tolliver was meticulously shining apples. More accurately, Hiram Tolliver was meticulously shining one. With a yelp, Mr. Tolliver fumbled the apple, flailing at the air as it fell. He leaned forward and lowered his voice. He leaned in a bit further. Mr. Tolliver leaned back, speaking loud enough for anyone to hear. He reached forward and snapped up the jars of jam, giving Luca a little wink. He leaned in for a final whisper. Kato motioned to the book in front of him. Oh, Sally, Luca brushed off a smudge of death. 30 recipes. A peek at the methods and one of the by. Mr. Nuncreed eyed Luca for a moment, then nodded in agreement. Nuncreed snatched the basket from Luca. Beck locked eyes with Luca. The look on her face was equal parts expectant and desperate. Beck gave Luca a quick nudge. bit much. Jeff dug through his pockets for a bit. Mr. Kerr winked with a wry smile. He gave Luca an energetic thump on the shoulder. Beck took a long breath, then gave a firm nod. Chapter 4: Dinner with the Moodwills. Ilona Moodwill was worried about change. But there was a difference between the controlled world of her plants and this cluttered cottage in a strange town. Almost done. Nellie was a blur of activity, digging through boxes. Sorry, love. Couldn't find the dishes. We'll have to make do with paper plates. Dinner went by without much conversation.
ไม่ได้พับจอนะ เดินไปเข้าห้องน้ำต่างหาก
As she watched Beck and Luca finish up their pizza, Ilona let herself relax into the chair. The things she cared about were still here. Nellie finally had the job of her dreams. Beck was beginning to take root. Ilona's task was simply to tend to them. She could do that. The valet both figured. After the Valentine. Mr. Nuncree jumped with a start. Luca motioned to the phone booth. Mr. Nuncree gently placed one of his substantial hands on Luca's shoulder. Luca peered up at Mr. Nuncreed. Kind eyes warmed a stern face. There was a deeper emotion hiding beneath it all. It was subtle, but Luca could sense something eating away at him. There was a shame lurking behind those eyes. A deep sadness. If Mr. Nuncreed was that worried about Rollo, maybe he could help. Mr. Nuncreed raised an eyebrow. Mr. Nuncreed's shoulders slumped. A deep sigh bellowed from his chest. Luca attempted to take a step back, but Nuncreed's hand clamped down on his shoulder. With a firm shove, Nuncreed manhandled Luca into the phone booth. The door latched shut with a mechanical hiss. As Luca pounded the glass, the floor dropped from under his feet. The inside of the phone booth was now a loose capsule, plummeting at gravity's whim. Luca winced and pressed his hands to the walls. As he braced for impact, the capsule hurried to a surprisingly smooth. He felt a cold rush of air and opened his eyes with hesitance. Two large figures in hazmat suits occluded his view. Luca heard the deep, resigned voice of Mr. Nuncreed over an intercom. He knows too much. The end. Wait. This isn't the end. I know there's still much more. Somehow this went wrong. Okay, let's try something else. Chapter 4. Our Harvest. Luca took a deep breath and ginger... The house was empty. Luca was sitting by the pond, listening to small waves lap against a rock. His father sat in a folding chair in front of him. Without turning, he spoke. "Why don't you grab me some nice bait?" "Sure thing, Dad." Luca hopped over to the tackle box and popped open the lid. Inside was a rolling, buzzing mess. "We're fishing with bees." Luca's father gave a warm chuckle. "Well, you catch more fish with bees than honey. Pick us out a good one." Luca closed his eyes and plucked out a bee. Holding it at arm's length, he heard, "Interesting choice. With a practiced flick of the wrist, the line buzzed in a the water accepted it without a splash or the wrong choice. The pond began to freeze. Sometimes we gotta make the wrong choice before we can make it right. Pallid ice propagated. Luca scrambled back as the ground beneath him turned cold. Dad? I'm sorry, kiddo. Understanding isn't always part of the deal. The relentless ice shot through the fishing line toward his father. Dad, look out! His father casually wound the reel. None of it's your fault, you know. Never was. Dad, we have to go! Luca grabbed his father's shoulders, trying to pull him away. Please, you have to run! The ice crackled as it spread across his father's hands. That's the thing about fishing, Luca. His chest began to crystallize. You toss your hook in, and you never know what you're gonna pull out. A shock of searing cold ran up Luca's arms. The chair tipped backwards in a single frozen mass. Luca tried to stop the momentum, but it was too late. He watched the icy form of his father. Dad, I don't understand. What does all this mean? The gentle rustle of leaves was the only reply. Luca's eyes struggled to focus. Faintly, he could hear Rollo amongst the noise. Rollo's voice was coming through more clearly now, but some words were still just static. The signal went silent. Luca held still, waiting for a response, his pounding heartbeat marking the pass. Rollo's voice began to fade. With that, the signal died for good. Luca grabbed the walkie-talkie and sprinted to the treehouse. Luca heard a group of footsteps approaching. He dashed behind the bushes to avoid being spotted. Mr. Tolliver paused, shifting his eyes to one side. Mr. Tolliver took one long, quiet. The three shared a determined look. The two boys shared a mischievous grin. Luca could only see a cloaked shape behind the rocket. He strained to hear as a muffled voice began. Fear gripped Luca's throat. Luca stared at the ground for a moment. The figure shifted slowly from behind the rocket, revealing itself. Luca reached over empathetically. Iggy's tone jolted to dejected anger. Luca slumped to the ground, overwhelmed by guilt. Iggy slumped to his knees. Luca grabbed the walkie-talkie and headed for the window. Luca and Iggy climbed up the back of the treehouse to its roof, where Rollo had constructed his MCDC, the Mission Control Defense Cannon. From behind the crowd of clipboards, William Kerr strode forward, a warm smile on his. Kerr's smile faltered. Luca's grip tightened on the MC. Luca's mind raced. He wiped his cheeks with a sleeve. What are you gonna do, Luca? Luca drew himself up and decided to take the only option they had left. Fight. He swung the mission control defense cannon around, aiming it confidently at the smirking face of William Kerr. Luca summoned his most insolent demeanor. Kerr turned his back on the two boys. With a nonchalant wave of the hand, he made. As the clipboards began to slowly advance on the treehouse, Luca looked to Iggy with resignation, and at the end, let's put a pin in this. Well, time to bust out the tickles. Beck lunged for. Tears. Beck redoubled her. Iggy's eyes. Iggy Beck shook the ooze. Chapter 4, The Best Policy. Luca paused for a moment, catching his breath. He'd only just met Beck, and somehow he already managed to drag her in. Hopefully he could make it up to her. Roxy and Fitz looked drained. It was clear they'd spent all day. Roxy, but her eyes were in a torrent of rambled. Roxy with a Roxy drew. Roxy tried to... Luca wiped his cheeks and gave a quick nod. Looking into the puddle, after the Valentine, both figure. Mr. Nuncree jumped with a start. Luca motioned. Well, time to bust out the strange. Beck's the only... At the side, Iggy's voice. The person at the was Rolla. Rollo was safe. A wave of granite if he heard. Chapter 4. Luca took. Luca was the house was. Luca was sitting by the pond. Chapter 4. Dinner with Ilona but there was almost done. Nellie was a blur of Dinner went by as she watched the things she cared. Nellie Beck was beginning to take root. Ilona's task was simply to tend to. She could do that. Luca's eyes were fixed to his plate, pushing a chunk of pineapple around with his finger. Nellie was the one who eventually broke the silence. Ilona nervously gestured toward the boxes. Luca wiped his face with his sleeve. Beck gave Luca a swift kick under the table. Luca glanced over to Beck. She seemed to be holding her breath. Beck slammed her fist into the table. Perhaps harder than she intended. Luca glanced outside to gauge the time. The sky was darker than he expected, filled with ominous clouds. Luca wiped his mouth one last time with his napkin and started to get up. Surprised, Luca turned around. He knew Rollo could be prickly, but Beck seemed cool. Rollo would warm up to her eventually. Probably. Luca began to respond, but the sky... Luca surveyed the roiling clouds. At that moment, the heavens opened up, unleashing torrential rain.
ฮัลโหลเล่นเกมหยุดสิวุฒิหยุดวันไหนอะ
Luca squinted into the eye hole of the microscope. Luca adjusted the slide with his fingers to get a better look. Luca wiped his hand off on his sweater and gave a nervous laugh. Beck looked down, timidly tapping the ladder with her feet. Luca flicked at one of the toggles. Luca bent down to examine the bouquet of wilting. Judging by the odor, they were well past their prime. He flipped open the attached card. took a moment to watch the rivulets of water running down the window. Luca took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. Luca let out a feral scream that echoed into the night. Her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. Beck brushed off her shirt and straightened up. As abruptly as it began, the storm abated. Beck gave Luca a light thump on the arm before heading in. Chapter Friendly Feud. The air was heavy with the hard rains, the smell of wet things. Despite his dreary surroundings, he'd never shared those details about his dad, not even Rollo. But it's not like this changed anything. Rollo was still his best friend. Adding Beck to the group would help balance things out. This is what Luca told himself as he headed to... phone booth was brand new. It didn't see much use. Luca had only ever heard him speak in this stiff yet gentle tone a few times, and it always meant one thing. Rollo scoffed. Luca stumbled on his words, knowing he'd said too much. Luca became instinctively angry in response. Both boys were now shouting across the distance. Rollo's tone changed to a calm, yet more intense anger. The words hung in the cold night air. Rollo's stomach dropped. knowing he'd crossed a line, but it was too late. Luca dug through his old stuff, not even sure what he was looking for. Gran cooed gently from the hallway. Luca just wanted to be alone. He waited to hear the sound of the front door. Luca dozed off. Luca still couldn't bring himself to. Besides, if he ran into Rollo, he'd have to actually confront the situation. The Adventures of Hank Atomic. Luca carefully opened the cover and began to. Rollo had received it for his birthday. A special hardcover edition with behind-the-scenes commentary and bonus. Rollo cherished it, but asked that Luca keep it at his house. Luca wasn't sure if it was because Rollo didn't trust himself with it, didn't trust his sister around it, or just wanted an excuse to come hang out at Luca's more often. Whatever the reason, Luca didn't mind, but it had stayed right there where Rollo had stashed it ever since. Now, at the foot of his bed, Luca lost himself in the pages. He'd read it all before, but at this moment, it somehow felt sentimental. He was well into issue number 5 when he heard soft footsteps from the hallway. Without realizing it, Luca had pouted away the entire afternoon. He once again felt the weight of it all and allowed his weary eyes to close. Luca stood in a vast. He looked up at his father standing. Walt was working a straw at the dad. Taking a final loud gurgle, he jangled the straw playfully with a warm, then lifted the empty glass as if to point into the source. Luca's eyes followed his father's gesture. In an instant, he was sitting in front of a blazing camp. Across from him sat a large figure in a yellow hazmat suit. The figure's voice was a scratchy, "Well, if it make yourself comfortable." Luca held his shivering hands over the flame to warm himself. "It doesn't work that way here." Their yellow-gloved hand pointed to the base of the flame. "It's a cold flame." Luca peered at the base of the fire. It wasn't wood that was burning. It was beacon tiny buildings, freezing and crumbling as they were consumed by flame. Luca could see small shadows moving in the burning city. People. Luca leapt to his feet. "We've got to help them!" The figure gave a dismissive wave of their hand. "Why waste energy helping people who can't even help themselves?" The figure bent down to examine the panicked crowd as they desperately tried to stop the flames. "They only care about what's right in front of them, not like us." Luca's voice was a trembling whisper. "Us?" The figure slowly stood up, grabbing its helmet with both hands. With a jolt and a twist, the suit emitted a gasp. A cloud of torpid mist escaped. Luca's own face looked back at him, older, worn. The sensation was odd, as if he'd caught his own reflect. The doppelganger smiled. "I tried to help once." He gestured towards his face. "And all it got me was this." Luca staggered back. "You aren't me." Luca felt a hand catch his shoulder. His father was there again, beside him. "Every choice sets us on a path. This is the end of one of your paths, son." Luca watched his older self shake its head ruefully. "Well, Dad, if you wanted him to see this, far be it from me to disappoint." Luca watched in shock as the figure took a confident step forward. In a flash of cold light, "What does all of..." Luca felt a reassuring squeeze on. "Just remember, why..." Luca woke up to see a hazy figure at the foot of his bed, silhouetted in the morning sun. Luca rubbed. The kind, concerned face of his gran came into focus. Gran silenced Luca with a gentle pat on the leg. Luca gave a reluctant nod. Luca took a deep breath. Chapters through thick and thin. Despite Luca's bitterness, Gran was right. A big fight changes the nature of a friendship. Whether, in the end, it is for the better or for the worse, all comes down to understand. If one is not careful, the same familiarity that builds the strongest of bonds can become the wrecking ball that shatters them. Luca emerged from seclusion, taking in the crisp festival air. But the events of the day weren't on his mind. He had to find Rollo. Foxy rolled her eyes, shaking her head. Luca looked down and kicked at the dirt. Mr. Kerr pointed to his grinning mouth. Jeff was staring into... Jeff turned to Luca with a furrowed brow, then gave an understanding nod. For a moment, the two now shared that same wistful gaze. Luca looked up at the satellite dish. Rollo nearly killed himself putting that up into the tree. While it didn't turn the radio, it did at least boost the signal. Luca stuck a... Those things always... Luca wrapped some tape. Hey, you never know. Luca placed a sinker on the line. Sometimes the best stuff is at the bottom of the pot. Luca wrapped a twig. Some fish have refined. Luca tied a small fishing with a log. Sorry, all became flesh. Griffin looked away suspiciously. Kato's eyes lit with excitement. Kato straightened up and cleared his throat as if preparing to sing. Kato stared at Luca eagerly. Luca grabbed natural photography. Luca grabbed The Adventures of Hank Atomic issue. Luca grabbed The Adventures of Hank Atomic issue number 5 from the shelf. Kato removed his book from the desk and replaced it with Luca's, turning on the light. As he slid the book under the purple light, The Adventures of Hank Atomic, issue 5. Luca clicked his tongue with recognition. Kato began flipping through the pages, stopping when he hit a glowing word. He continued flipping. Reaching the end of the book, Kato looked up. Before Luca could finish his sentence, Griffin handed... Luca shrugged, taking a size... Luca tongued at his cheeks, feeling something rough between his teeth. He reached into his mouth and pulled out a slip of paper. He shook off the bits of corn dog to read this. Luca finished off the remainder of the corn dog. Lumi waved his hands around sarcastically as he began. Rollo sheepishly handed Luca the balloons. Luca threw himself at Rollo. Luca tied us fishing with... Rollo handed Luca an Luca, some things are going to happen that might be difficult for you to understand. If I am honest, I hardly understand them myself. But whatever happens, I need you to know that I love you. None of this is fair to you. You have already lost so much. We both have. I wish there was a simpler way forward. But if there is, I haven't thought of it. God knows I've tried everything I've done. I hope someday you can accept that. Love, Gran. Luca folded the paper into his pocket and headed up the ladder. Luca was at a loss for words, but that was fine. Words aren't always necessary. Sadly, this wasn't. A distant rumble shook the treehouse. It was not fireworks. It was something the boys couldn't possibly comprehend. Something as old and cruel as time itself. A shockwave of cold tore through the room. A bitter, before they could react, two boys, reunited by friendship, only to be cruelly separated by a malevolence beyond. And so, our story ends on this melancholy scene. In a silent treehouse turned statuary, in a town brought low by its secrets, sits a pair of friends, alone, for the rest of time. The end. No, that can't be the... I won't accept it, and I hope you won't either. There are more endings. More possibilities. I can feel we are just going to have to sort through them all. Luca began to respond, but the sky answered for him as the clouds above began to break, revealing patches of star-filled summer night. Luca stopped himself mid-sentence. Luca saw Beck skulking by the gate. Beck grabbed the wrought iron. Beck's voice was an excited whisper. The mysterious figure retracted their mask, hair pushing out from all corners. A chill ran down Luca's spine. His vision blurred. Beck stifled a sharp wince, and Luca looked down to see himself wrenching her hand. Gran tousled her hair back under the face mask. Gran gave Eris a curt nod. What big ears you have. Lucas sat. After checking to make sure the coast was clear, Beck gave him a gentle tug on his sweater. clipboard finished writing with a scratchy flourish and looked up. Mr. Nuncreed, arms... He snatched the pad and scribbled his name so hard the pen nearly snapped. The clipboards looked at each other for a moment, then broke into laughter as they walked away. The phone booth was... It didn't see much use. William Kerr and Gus... The mayor gave a half-heart... Kerr locked his arm on Gus's shoulder. With a glimmer in his eye, Kerr... Rollo waggled his head with pride. Luca sucked in a long breath. Rollo let out a low whistle. Rollo and Luca shot back a look. Luca gazed out the window. Chapter Secret. Summer forged ahead, but the nights only seemed to grow colder. Luca walked home slowly under the pale starlight, cautious to avoid any more surprises. Reaching home, he slipped quietly into bed, half dreading what they might discover the next day. Beck rolled their eyes as Rollo strutted across the room. Rollo flung open the cabinet with confidence. He coughed as a veil of dust hit his face. A look of realization crept onto Luke. All three kids snapped to glance at each other, then before he could finish, Luke The three crowded around the hutch. With the glass doors opened, their eyes searched for anything, but the only distinct feature was its impeccability. As Beck pulled on one of the teacups, it slanted forward with a hollow click. The entire hutch began to rustle. Luca jostled each cabinet drawer in turn. Only one was he fingered through the filing cabinet, pausing at a bulging folder labeled Walter. For a long moment, he just stared at it. Luca nodded and caressed the label with his thumb. Rollo swiped the folder from the drawer and began leafing through the pages. He whistled to himself, barely looking at the text. He stopped at a page and mimed, holding up a monocle. Rollo looked up with heightened surprise. Rollo's finger traced across the page. Rollo scanned through several more pages. Luca, staring blankly at the cabinet this whole time, spoke softly. Rollo rustled the folder, trying to loose more pages. Luca frantically shoved the remaining cabinet folders, trying to find another labeled Walter. Luca slammed the drawer shut. A spider web of string connected, interspersed with hastily scrawled notes. Rollo casually spun open a lid and dipped. He smacked his lips. Rollo plunged his hand in the jar, fishing out a soggy slip of. Rollo offered the slimy note to Luca and licked. They crowded around a worn-down old map of Beacon Pines. Rollo carefully traced the path with his finger. He jabbed down at the end point. Luca looked up from the map. Beck flicked off the light. Overhead, creaking floorboard. The kids looked up. Then suddenly, without realizing, they'd been holding their breath. All three exhaled shakily and glanced. A muffled male voice broke. A final few footsteps reached the entrance above. The three kids shuffled to the corners without a peep. As he began to descend the stairs, thump, 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 thump. At the bottom step, the man paused, squinting to search the room for signs. Rollo shifted suddenly. Luca gave him an intense, chastising look and whispered through clenched teeth. It was too late. Rollo was already inching toward the stairway. He screeched as he charged toward the shadowy figure. With all his weight, Rollo tackled the man to the... From the dark corner, they saw something move. Luca scrambled, pressing his fingers to the man as Beck flicked back on the light. Chapter 7. The Interrogation of Hiram Tolliver. Still unconscious, Mr. Tolliver slumped heavily in a shoddy old chair. His hands were bound with rope, his feet tied with some loose string. The kids huddled in a circle, discussing their plan. One thing was certain. They needed to know what he was doing in Luca's house. After some deliberation, they'd run the class. Rollo brandished a... I've got this. Rollo swaggered past the without even looking. Mr. Tolliver remained motionless. Rollo spun around. He'd clearly expected to rouse Mr. Tolliver with his... Beck and Luca gave each other, and Rollo slammed his fist on the table. He grabbed the table lamp and... Mr. Tolliver groaned, and slowly he recoiled with a muddled, weary sound. The chair wobbled as he attempted to straighten up. Mr. Tolliver could only make out with a gruff tone. The doubtful expression on Beck and Luca's faces transformed into awe. Rollo, hitting his stride, was now channeling every detective trope his memory could recall. He slammed the table again. Mr. Tolliver's voice became desperate. He was nearly in tears. Mr. Tolliver was in a daze, now more confused. He shook his head, feeling more and more dizzy. His voice faded to a whisper. With that, Mr. Tolliver passed out cold. Rollo swung around with a repentant grimace. There were rarely simply a... The bottom corner shelf, only one bind, cellular by... Michael... Chapter 8, 6 feet under, 3 towns over. The kids spent the rest of the... Luca tried to shake the thought. Explosives. Gran was the only family he had. But the old map with the symbol of explosives as the sun began to set. Rollo shut his book with an assertive nod. Rollo muttered under it. Beck slammed her finger down on the open page before glancing down to read. Something tickled the back of Luca. The question hung in the air. Beck rubbed her eye. Luca's heart was pounding as if he was lucky. Gran, or whoever it. And of course, there was Mr. Toll. Dealing with him would be the first order. Luca shook out his arms. He held perfectly still, tempering his breath. She was asleep. His only hope was that she hadn't found Mr. Tolliver before dozing off. Mr. Tolliver was nowhere to be seen. Or maybe Gran knew everything. Luca's hungry stomach, not realizing it, Luca rushed over to the pile of jam. He flipped the lid to read the label. As Luca climbed with each consecutive step, his legs weakened. His stride began to fall. He tried to grab for the railing. Something was wrong. Luca groaned and tried to. His limbs might as well have been bolted to the ground. Through numb lips, he mumbled just before falling. Chapter 9. A speech to end all speeches. Luca awoke to find himself face down in bed. He moaned into his pillow. Why would Gran drug him? Or rather, Why was she trying to drug Mr. Shaking the questions from his woozy head. Augustus Valentine nervously wiped his brow. Gus cleared his throat and William Kerr bounded on the stage. He gave Gus a hearty slap on the back and motioned him off the stage. Mr. Kerr pulled a fix. Mr. Kerr took a moment to survey the crowd. He wiped away. He thumped the podium to Mr. Kerr nodded confidently. The crowd was silent. Mr. Kerr methodically made eye contact with each section of the crowd. His voice began to build to a cry. The crowd began to look around nervously. Mr. Kerr quickly flicked through his note cards. He raised his hands up to the heavens. it. A merciless wall of impossibly cold for a man like on a stage. The end. There's that ice again! Maybe we should just... No, we got a little close, please. They'd run the classic. Luca and Rollo ducked behind a barrel, leaving Beck to her task. With a few crisp snaps, she roused. Mr. Tolliver looked down and shifted a bit, testing his restraints. Beck caught herself before letting the surprise manifest on her face. She'd already gotten him to reveal his relation to Grant. This was gonna be easy. Mr. Tolliver wriggled a bit in his restraints. Beck quickly removed the rope. Mr. Tolliver rubbed the growing knot on his forehead. Beck twirled her hand, as if to prompt Mr. Tolliver to finish her. Beck shook her head and clicked her tongue. Mr. Tolliver let out an amused huff and Beck was on a roll now, playing Mr. Heading for the stairs, she grinned and gave him a peppy wave. With a shrug, he could... Beck blinked slowly. She turned to the table. Beck marked each scrap of paper. Luca and Beck looked at Rollo with amazement. Gus looked around nervously. Eris's cry hung in the air. Solomon stood proudly at the entrance to the drugstore, holding a brown bag overflowing. Solomon shoveled Beck cupped her hand. Beck flung open the door. Luca cracked his neck. The inside of the phone without even the space to pant. Suddenly, it was the air was still. Rollo's hands hovered over the field of... Joseph waited for a moment in silence. He gestured toward the strange tubes. Nuncreed let out a growl of a sigh. He shook his head wistfully. Nuncreed took a menacing step towards the... Luca began to laugh. The color drained from Nuncreed's face. Nuncreed grabbed Luca by the shoulders. His eyes were frantic. A jolt of realization struck Mr. Nuncreed. Chapter 8. The Cold Heart. Beck leapt up, allowing the suction to yank her into the dark. Dimness eclipsed around her like the shutter of a camera as she seemed to... Her only points of reference were glints of upcoming turns, which approached with frightening speed, only to carom her gracefully along. She heard the tinny, distant echoes of Rollo's glee. Once she stopped fighting against it, the ride was impossibly smooth. Then, all of a sudden, as if minutes had passed in an instant, light blazed into view. A burst of wintry air snuffed across her face, and she was flung out into the cold. As they rounded the corner to the frozen town square, they spotted Mr. Nuncreed inching cautiously toward a pit at its center. He held his arms out gingerly, as if approaching a beast in the wild. Upon closing the distance, Luca recognized what Nuncreed was after. Gran stood confidently at the edge. One nearby, a wheelbarrow had been emptied out. She held a lit torch, which flickered in the bitter wind. Mr. Nuncreed turned back toward the kids. Desperation in... Rollo and Beck held steadfast in awe. Luca approached closer. Mr. Nuncreed spun back toward Gran, his voice growing louder. Mr. Nuncreed winced with anguish. His voice hardened. They both now yelled, not to each other, but at fate. It's making their peace with long-held... The wind howled with encouragement. They menaced at each other, both catching their breath. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Amid a blur of emotion, the wind calmed. And in the it was all just Falling to his knees, Luca whimpered. The tears crystallized as they hit the... Gran stared at Luca for a moment with warm sympathy. She stiffened up and brandished the torch at Mr. Nuncreed. Ignoring his final plea, Gran flung the torch into the... She smiled and exhaled, and the torch echoed as it ricocheted down the hole. Before Gran could finish, the ground shook her. Gran only had time to spin around and run to her attempt to shield him, an honorable but trifling act. Unflinching love, pitted against an unthinking horror, there was no contact. Her warm embrace, that is where they remain. And so, in a town brought low by its secrets, sits the frozen statues of a misguided band of meddlers. Well, that was on the bright side. We finally figured out where all the ice is coming from. Now, we just need to find a way to deal with a mystic, unfathomable force of nature.